No justice, no peace. No racist police.
So I say that when we come out today, we have power.
Yes.
And we need to be in the thousands, in the millions, and we will be. Because it starts right here.
Guilty. The truth never dies. The truth never dies. Come on.
Welcome to Naptown People's Radio. I'm your host, Derek Ford, here with my comrade and co-host,
Danny Abdullah.
As always, we're here to shine a light on what the ruling class wants to keep hidden while bringing the necessary attention to the real issues facing our class from the perspective of the people, not the oppressors. We've got an exciting episode for you this week. After we get into the Naptown breakdown, we're going to be joined by City-County Councilor Jesse Brown, who, while running as an open socialist, beat incumbent Zach Adamson, the third highest ranking Democrat in the city during the Democratic primaries for District 13. We are all too familiar with those who run on platforms that appeal to our interests and needs, only to be instantly betrayed once they get into office. But with Brown, it's been the opposite. He's refused to be bought off by the corporations and banks, refused to cave under the crushing weight of the Democratic Party institutional establishment, and has been rewarded for representing his constituents by repeated and finally a successful attempt to remove him from the Democratic Caucus. And if you don't know what that means, you're not alone, and you'll find out in the next segment. But first, we'll get into the Naptown breakdown. So last week, we talked about another abusive cop, Nicholas Cawley, a 9-year IMPD veteran, might as well be 9 years old, who has committed abuses against our people almost every single year since he's been on the force. He recently made headlines when he was arrested for stalking and harassing his ex-wife using police equipment and Hinge, which is a dating app for those of you who don't know. Unsurprisingly, he's back on the streets after being made bail. For those of you who have been following, we are mobilizing to support Black female veteran Jada Traynor as she faces ridiculous and really insulting but serious charges from the Marion County Prosecutor's Office. However, her legal team asked for and was granted a motion of continuance while they continue debunking the county's quote-unquote case against her. And we were happy to see so many of you at the grand opening of Art for Exoneration, the Vernon T. Bateman Experience last week, and at the joint show he did with the Cristo Rey High School students this past Friday. We talked about Vernon's case on here, and we will continue talking about it. At the end of the show, we're going to spend the time to focus on something that is particularly disgusting and particularly time sensitive, something we must act on immediately, and we'll tell you exactly how you can contribute to undoing one of the many injustices this human continues to face.
All right, so that'll do it for this week's Naptown Breakdown. We'll be right back with City County Councilor Jesse Brown.
The Indianapolis Liberation Store is the one-stop radical shop for organizers and activists in today's struggles. We have a full range of buttons, stickers, posters, t-shirts, and revolutionary literature, including books, pamphlets, and more. Black August is coming up, and we've curated 3 bundles to celebrate and encourage your education in the Black struggle in America and abroad. The bundles range from $30 to $80, and each bundle includes buttons and a copy of The Supreme Court versus Democracy, as well as more books. The first tier including The Black Belt Thesis, the second tier including Assata by Assata Shakur, and Blood in My Eye by the Black Panther George Jackson, plus a Fred Hampton t-shirt. The third tier has 5 books and 2 t-shirts, so definitely go check out the full range of Black August options at indieliberationcenter.org/store.
Naptown People's Radio is recorded live at the Indianapolis Liberation Center, your liberated space in the heart of downtown Indianapolis, located at 18th and Meridian Street. The Liberation Center is rooted in a fundamental truth. Liberation is never given by the oppressor. It is won through organized, united struggle. Unity is never simple, so we actively bridge the divide imposed by the ruling class through education, culture, politics, spirituality, and more. We reject competition and embrace cooperation, bringing together community members, organizers, and future organizers to train a new generation of activists. Together, we're fighting for a world built on the interests of people and planet. By organizing across our city, we're reviving a collective spirit and renewing our belief in a better, necessary future. This work is hard, and it's not free. We depend on supporters like you to keep the center open and growing. Visit IndieLiberationCenter.org to become a monthly sustainer today. Your contribution ensures this liberated space thrives, opening new avenues in the struggle for liberation. Thank you for your support. Now back to Naptown People's Radio.
And we're back on Naptown People's Radio, and we are honored to be joined by our comrade Jesse Brown, who's a City-County Councilor for District 13, a member of the Democratic Socialists of America, and somebody who we've talked about on the show before because he was the first person to speak out against the Hogsett administration's coddling of sexual assaulters and hasn't stopped, and he's consistently stood with the people as we've demanded an end to the genocide in Gaza and on many issues. So thank you so much for coming on the show, Jesse.
Oh, thank you for having me. The honor's all mine. I'm really happy to be here, and thanks for the kind words.
Yeah, no, well, we definitely mean them. And if we could start with what I mentioned, so, because it was, and I remember you spoke at a press conference that the DSA and the Indiana Doula Abortion Collective and others organized. I think it was September 14th or 24th last year, calling for Hogsett to resign. And since then, of course, the landscape has just gotten even wilder in terms of the allegations that come out. And honestly, I just can't understand the complete lack of response by the Democratic Party establishment to this ongoing, it's almost like the floodgates have opened courageously, more women are coming out with stories of being, sexual harassment, sexual assault, sexual violence by Democratic Party establishment politicians. And there's just a continual effort to sweep it under the rug. And I just can't understand, we were talking earlier and I was saying, these people bring in consultants for everything. They're not even bringing a consultant to come in and be like, here's what you do. You got to find a scapegoat, throw them to the public or whatever. I mean, so I was just wondering if you could help me understand that, if that's possible.
Yeah, if I figure out the answers, I'll definitely share it. No, but I'm happy to talk about that. I first wanted to briefly toot my own horn just for a second and say I did take a photo of the Indianapolis Business Journal's editorial calling for Hogsett to resign 10 months after I made that same call. And it was kind of a Dewey newspaper for the history buffs, right?
Did they? I don't have a subscription, so did they mention you?
Me. They did not mention me, other than to say, which was kind of funny. I'm still an elected Democrat, but they said city councilors from 3 different parties have called for him to resign. So they can see that I'm not like the other Democrats, which I don't mind. But yeah, so to get to your question, you're right. Lack of transparency, tightening of ranks. One quick point on that. So last month, my colleague Krista Carlino left the Democratic Caucus, joining me as an outsider and an uncaucused person. The reason she did that was because Vop Osili and Maggie Lewis, the Democratic Caucus majority leader, took a binding caucus vote saying that every Democrat in the caucus had to vote to keep Vop as the leader of the caucus. So no one was allowed to vote their own conscience. They could be censured or expelled if they chose to vote for my motion to call for new leadership.
Can you say that one more time?
That's right. So the Democratic Caucus, in rare circumstances, can take a caucus position, meaning you are breaking the caucus rules to vote your conscience and do anything other than what the majority has voted to do. And Krista Carlino got up and walked out of the room rather than abide by that.
Wow. Well, hats off to Krista Carlino.
Absolutely.
And
courageous.
Holy, that's the most undemocratic thing I've ever heard.
Right. And remember, there are no minutes to these meetings. There is no open discussion. The agenda is formed by leadership, not democratically. So leadership just pushes people around and gets to do what they want. Normally, if a majority of a legislative body is meeting to talk about things, by law, they have to allow the public in those meetings. They have to provide minutes and they have to record it. the caucus gets a special carve out in our open door law because they're supposed to be just deciding on political business. But the supermajority is so unaccountable to not only the people, but even their own party. They don't owe anyone anything, and they just get away with whatever they want. So I should actually answer your question, though, huh? So in terms of tightening ranks around the abusers, that was one example of how we've tightened ranks. But we see it over and over again. You know, another one of my colleagues was in the news in the last couple weeks for two different women having experiences of sexual abuse, sexual harassment, sexual assault. Both of these women considered themselves to be in relationships with my colleague, Councilor Graves. So it wasn't the exact same situation as being subordinate, to Thomas Cook, Joe Hogsett's chief of staff, but it was a similar relationship in that it was a much younger person being, these are my words, sexually preyed upon by an older, more established politician. And we see that over and over again. Obviously, right now, as we're recording this, it's a huge national story about Jeffrey Epstein and those tactics of not only bringing up young people and making sure that their exposure to powerful people is in a gross sexual way, but also in making sure that enough powerful people have this same experience that they see it as important to their own self-interest to help shut down any of this coming to light, right? We've seen Trump's hiding because he's on the Epstein list. I'm pretty positive.
Yeah.
We know Bill Clinton, same thing. So we've got powerful predators and abusers in both of the capitalist parties who, would rather anything else than see justice done. Yeah. So, I wrote a constituent newsletter called Indy's Epstein Island, talking about just this exact thing. And it truly is incredibly pervasive. For every woman or, even man who's come forward talking about sexual harassment and sexual abuse, I know of 4 or 5 others who've had weird, borderline, non-consensual experiences with people they worked with or people they met at a Democratic or Republican Party mixer or event. And so just over and over again, we see people have this implicit offer that they can be protected and their political career supported and encouraged as long as they give the powerful people what they personally want, whether that's, sexually or otherwise. And, I don't blame anybody who's coming up and has to be put in that situation, but there have been a lot of people who've navigated their way through that and then turn around and blame victims who were less successful at navigating through that or who didn't want to navigate through that and then experienced all this predation. So honestly, I really do think the vast majority of the political establishment, even if they weren't perpetrators themselves, they knew that some level of this stuff was going on, and they fear what will happen when the people get access to the truth and see how complicit they all are.
Yeah, it seems like they just don't have a leg to stand on. And so, in other words, like the reason why they wouldn't just throw some scapegoat out there is because they would all be exposed.
That scapegoat would turn around and immediately start telling stories, right?
Yeah.
That's my suspicion anyway. I've never seen anything to disprove it.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. We will link the Indy's Epstein Island letter article, really, I think, in the show notes here, because I think it's interesting just perusing it right now. The sort of blackmail tactics that you list,
right?
Of how you can, why it is. So, I mean, just to go the strategy, if I can just read your words to you, to our listeners. But this is for Epstein. It's for Epstein, right? Right. So he used his own money and power to obtain an endless supply of fresh young people to rape and sexually exploit. 2, he attracted rich and powerful people into his circle, inviting them to participate in sexual crimes and documenting their participation. 3, he used the complicity of powerful people as a shield for himself. Even after many abuse survivors spoke out against him, many powerful people continued to support him silently. And 4, as a result, justice was slow and his behavior was not deterred. Most of Epstein's collaborators had not been brought to justice, and odds are that many of them never will. As we are now seeing, Indianapolis Democratic Party politics operates according to a sickeningly familiar playbook, end quote. And that's, unfortunately, I think, resonates very profoundly with what's happening here.
I always can tell how deep my cuts are in constituent newsletters because I've noticed, I can see on the back end, by the way, if you're a subscriber to my newsletter, I know who you are. And so I know that there are people within the Hogsett administration. I know there's people at a lot of different media outlets who read these. and I'll get a lot of email responses wanting to talk about it sometimes, but the ones where I can see the most engagement, the most clicks, the most people forwarding it on to other people are ones like this, where I got almost nobody wanting to talk about it. Although at the end of the newsletter, I just said, by the way, me talking like this makes me an enemy of the political establishment. They're going to be funding a powerful primary challenger against me. And I'm proud to say I got $250 worth of donations on a recurring monthly basis just from that little tag at the end. So people see this, it resonates with them, and they're wanting to help keep me around to keep telling the secrets. So proud of that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the people are with you. That's for sure. I mean, the people are with you, and they're not with the Democratic Party. At the same time, of course, right, we have, we're told that the Democratic Party is a lesser of two evils. I guess they sexually assault people in nicer ways. I'm not sure. But, like for the registered rank and file Democrat, the way the party operates seems to be very opaque. Like I was just admitted to you, and I'll admit to the listeners, I didn't know what the Democratic Party Caucus was until they tried to kick Jesse out of it and then they eventually did.
Right.
Basically for not following the party line and for actually speaking out against his colleagues who were, engaging in behavior that was like criminal in some instances. So how does internally, is there a way that you or the rank and file Democrats or the just registered Democratic voters could change how the party operates? Or, how does it even really operate?
It's funny because so my wife's an attorney, and so we've taken deep dives into municipal code and into state law to try to figure out how can we hold the powerful accountable. And unfortunately, for people within elected office, it's considered that, just unelect them. That's how you hold them accountable. We don't really need to police their behavior too much, which makes sense in theory. And similarly, the Democratic and Republican parties are both considered lowercase d democratic institutions where you're allowed to just enter them and vote differently to have different party leaders. And so, again, the state government shouldn't get involved because that would be oppressive. We have to let these lowercase d democratic institutions self-police. Makes some sense on paper, again. But here's my experience, right? So the lowest level of elected party kind of leadership or membership is the precinct committee person. And in 2022, the year before I ran for City County Council, I ran for Democratic Party precinct committee person in my neighborhood. And I was pretty explicit about what I wanted to do when I ran for office. I knocked all my neighbors' doors in my neighborhood and said, look, I've been voting Democrat my entire life. And yet, even with a supermajority in the council and even with the mayor, we still don't have sidewalks on our street. We still have crime. I don't have, as good a job as I want. What about you? And I won that election with 75% of the vote because I said the Democratic Party as it currently is constituted only cares about you if you have money or if you have political connections. Nobody in our neighborhood has either, so they don't listen to us. And again, apparently that resonated, right? Because I won that election pretty substantially. Now I don't want to mislead people. I got 45 votes out of 60. So not a lot of people actually show up in these elections. But again, that shows people, similarly in Indiana, not a lot of people show up and vote for the Democratic or Republican Party every 4 years or every 2 years when we have elections because people don't think that it could actually change the world, right? They don't think their material circumstances could change based on these elections. So getting back to it, precinct committee people. There are, I think, 622 precinct committee spots in Marion County. Technically speaking, every few years, we all get together and elect new leadership. But most people who pull the ballot for the Democratic Party don't know that this structure even exists, don't know how they would run for this spot, don't know what things they'd be able to vote for or how that would work. And so we haven't seen it be very effective. And then let's take it forward a little bit. After I got elected onto the City-County Council, the first time, which Derek, you just mentioned, that I almost got expelled from the Democratic Caucus, it was because I went out and fought hard against the Republicans at the State House. And so
that's right.
What happened there, and I found this out much later, was that President Vop Osili had secret, unannounced to the public, backroom deals with Republicans that I was disrupting because he promised on my behalf, I guess, that the council wouldn't interfere in a lot of their, ridiculous schemes. And then I was making him into a liar, even though he had never even asked me not to do that, right? So another example of that came, I just found out about it last month. some people in my district wanted me to ban right turns on red at a couple key intersections. That's a widely accepted safety practice. It'll probably save lives. People get hit and killed walking, biking, driving all the time in Indianapolis. So I reached out to my contact at Department of Public Works and said, hey, I would love to ban right on red at these dangerous intersections. What do I have to do that? And what I was told was, oh, you can't do that. I said, what do you mean I can't do that? And he's like, oh, no, yeah, the State House had a thing, and yeah, we're not allowed to ban right on red. I said, wait, when did that happen? I follow politics pretty closely. I don't remember any sort of agreement with that.
Yeah.
Took weeks of back and forth, and finally they admitted to me nothing was ever written down. This was a handshake agreement between the mayor's staff and Todd Houston, the Republican Speaker of the House. The mayor promised somehow on my behalf, without again ever talking to me or my constituents about it, that we would forgo safety in our districts so as to avoid irritating Senator Aaron Freeman. So all the time, despite this supposed democracy that exists within the Democratic Party or within, our government, we have elected leaders doing things that don't have any public exposure. There's nothing. I asked for anything in writing proving that this had happened, and it doesn't exist. It was literally just a verbal agreement, but it apparently has the force of law, and I was not allowed to, in my own district, do what my constituents came to me. I didn't come up with that idea.
Right.
They were asking me for this, and I said no because the Republican Speaker of the House might get offended.
Oh, my God. And you're an elected official.
Right.
You're not – I mean, just think about how disempowering that is, for me. I'm not – you're actually in my district, so you are my elected official, and – I can't even come to you with I can come to you with a concern, and a valid concern, a concern
totally
that could legally be addressed legally, right? I mean, there's no law against it.
No law whatsoever.
And you're just told that that's not possible, and you have to then go spend weeks digging around to find that it actually is possible, except for
political leadership.
Yeah,
their political will just isn't there because they'd rather keep Republican politicians happy than their own constituents.
That's unbelievable. And can I just ask you, what in this, I know you said you're open to gotcha journalism. This isn't a gotcha moment, but were you able to follow up on that?
Well, so by the time they finally admitted it to me, they said, well, it basically expired at the end of July, so we'll move ahead with it now.
Okay. So you did actually get
so
them
we are moving forward with getting the right turn on red banned, but they wouldn't even, I'm sure that's why they finally admitted it to me.
Right.
As long as they knew, because they know I'm loudmouth and I'll go blow up their spot, right? But
yeah, loudmouth, AKA somebody who speaks the truth.
Right. Yeah, that's what I'm paid to do.
So I was correct and incorrect. I mean, you were, the first time they tried to expel you was for speaking out against your own party, but it was really goes to show you there's one party.
Yeah, right? That's right.
It's like Julius Nyerere said of Tanzania. I think he was accused of, by in some interview, they said, oh, you have a one party state. And he said, yeah, you Americans also have a one party state. Just in typical American extravagance, you have two of them.
Love that quote. It is so true. It is so true.
Okay, so there's a precinct level, and there's 620 or so.
622, I think.
And they elect leadership.
At the county level.
Okay. And then what other structures are in place? I mean...
we could go deep on this because there's structures at the county level, and remember there's 92 counties in Indiana, and then the county leaders elect district leaders. So there's 7 of those, one for each congressional district, and then those elect a state central committee. But then the state central committee also has some people who are just allowed to be on it without having to win any elections at all. And they weaponize identity politics in order to, justify why some people just get to get special seats at the table. So, for example, one of my political nemesis, George Hornado, who is running for Congress as an AIPAC shill to try to make sure that Palestinians continue to be the victims of genocide, he was a member of the State Central Committee for many years without having won any of these elections. Instead, he, who is from a very wealthy background but does happen to be Latino, insisted that the Democratic Party had to listen to Latino voices. And so he built himself a new caucus that then got an automatic seat at the table. And so he had to convince a few political insider Latinos to make him their State Central Committee member. So he didn't actually have to take the long path towards talking to all of his neighbors and slowly working up the ranks. He built a ladder for himself and then cut it down behind him, right?
Right. And of course, as we all know, if there's one pressing issue that Latino people in Indianapolis and the United States face, it is the, fabricated Palestinian oppression of the Israelis.
Yes,
I mean,
we must stand with Israel. Of course, that's what every Latino constituent of mine tells me. Just every time we meet, they just
that's
won't
the
shut
first
up
thing
about
in
it.
the mind. It's not about the ICE raids.
No.
It's not about
what ICE raids. Is that happening?
It's not about anti-Latino racism and bigotry.
No.
Or police violence. It's protecting Israel, right?
He's got his finger on the pulse, man. Yeah, he's really paying attention.
Yeah, well, like you said, I mean, we can definitely go deeper into that, and for our listeners, it exposes my own ignorance about this. But on the other hand, I'm thinking, well, geez, I mean, I want to know more about it, but at the same time, it's like, well, I guess the good that it does, it really just shows how corrupt and how hard it must be to operate inside of this institution that is set up in such a way as to, just protect itself and its leadership and its establishment. So it's like the rank and file really have very little power.
Right.
Still boggles my mind how hard you had to fight to get no right on reds on a couple of intersections in your own neighborhood.
Yeah, I mean, when I won my election, I knew I was the only person on this Indianapolis City-County Council who proudly used the word socialist to describe my politics. And so I knew, or I expected, that I'd be in a room where I lost a lot of votes, right?
Yeah.
I'd make a persuasive argument, and then maybe one or two of my colleagues would come over, but mostly I was going to lose a lot of votes, but I was at least going to be able to kind of push things in the right direction. What I found out, though, was that leadership controls what's on the agenda, and so we didn't even vote. We didn't vote on almost anything as a caucus, even though that's supposed to be where we're figuring out the policy for our city, hundreds of thousands of people that we represent. No joke, I believe there were 3 votes taken while I was a member of that caucus for 14 months. 2 of them were, shall we expel Jesse Brown from the caucus? Another one was, shall we have Vapa Osley and Allie Brown as the leaders of the caucus? That's the only things we voted on. That sounds like it can't possibly be true, but I'm not joking at all.
Yeah, I'm at a loss for words.
Right.
I mean, that's just so. And by the way, on this show we've gone back and forth. So we initially we only referred to Osley as Samuel Osley because Voice of the People. I found out Danny taught me was a nickname he gave himself to stand for Voice of the People, VOP, Osley. But now Danny is referring to him again as VOP Osley, but VOP stands for Voice of the Predators. Just so our many consistent listeners are up to date. If you missed an episode as to why we might be referring to Samuel Osley or VOP Osley variously in different episodes as we learn more about his terribleness.
It's a good note, and I'm happy to have Voice of the Predator sign to take home with me today. Yes.
All right. So I did have a question about the curfew because of the quote unquote mass shootings, which is not to minimize the tragic loss of life that happened July 4th through 5th, but a mass shooting kind of conjures up the image of somebody with like automatic weapons unleashing indiscriminately at a mall. It's tragic that several young people died. Two young people died July 4th through 5th, but the immediate response from the cops was like, parents, we're not here to do your job for you. And then the next response is actually, we're going to criminalize you and we're going to criminalize your kids. So, and for our listeners, we covered this a couple episodes ago when it happened, but what's the update on that, on these curfews, and where do you stand in terms of like what is being done and what can actually be done? Because we know that curfews aren't, and criminalization isn't the way to, prevent crime.
Right. Yeah. So the Indianapolis City-County Council jumped into action when the press made them look bad, because that's about the only thing that'll motivate them to move quickly. The 2 times that the council, while I've been on, has jumped quickly to get a policy ready have both been for criminalization. Last year, it was for spinning, if you remember when that crisis was happening. No one could sleep. It was so dangerous and horrible. And I'm not going to lie. If somebody's like having a big street party in front of my house, that might frustrate me. I might want something to be done about it. Might be like slightly antisocial behavior. But the way that we jumped into action to write a brand new law to give the police more powers for what was maybe annoying, but had not resulted in deaths, had not resulted in massive property damage like so many other things have done in the city. That was the first time. Now it's for the curfews. And we leapt into action to quickly work with our legal team and work with the IMPD's legal team to figure out how we could do something, anything. And what we came up with, what the Leroy Robinson, the chair of the Public Safety Committee, came up with was make the curfews a little bit harsher by starting them a couple hours earlier. And, I'm behind. I always do watch every committee meeting, but I have not watched the Public Safety Committee meeting where they talked about this. But my understanding of the discussion was, well, the police don't actually need this, but it also doesn't hurt them. I guess we should just pass this anyway, because why not? Just show people that we're doing something. And, on the one hand, I'm reaching here, but I'm trying to give some credit for seeing a problem in society and realizing that as the elected leadership of the city, we should be doing something. So maybe the tiniest bit of kudos for that. But what is it exactly that we're doing? The curfew said for weekdays, 9 p.m. is when no one's allowed to be on the streets if you're a youth. That seems a little ridiculous. That's not even dark yet, right? So we're saying that the police have to get involved if someone is out on the streets before it's totally dark in the summertime. And really, it gets to why would these kids be on the streets? And, I find it really weird. We were talking before we started recording about the kind of leave it to Beaver mentality about what a 1950s nuclear family should look like. And don't those parents know where their kids are? Their parents are probably at work. Yeah. Or their parents are probably blown off steam after being at work all week. 40% of people in Marion County are known as ALICE, asset limited, income constrained, but employed. So in other words, they're working, but they actually cannot afford to pay all their bills based on the salary that they earn.
So it's like a very fancy way of saying they're working poor.
They are working poor, exactly. Like in a scientifically defined way. Neolib's gotta have some acronym for it. But it means that people are working as hard as they can and still cannot pay all their own bills. And that is a stressful thing to go through that offers moral fatigue and moral injury. And, parents are trying their best. They need more resources. They need more tools. They don't need to be lectured. I had somebody who runs a nonprofit for homeless youth in my district who reached out both to me and the chair of the Public Safety Committee just saying, hey, please will you rethink this? Because, the curfew discussions I'm hearing all say, yeah, we're going to make the parents come in and, the parents will be in trouble if they don't come in, et cetera. So I'm a former high school teacher and I'd seen this myself. A lot of high schoolers in Indianapolis are homeless, whether they're with or not with their parents. They don't have stable living conditions right now. Yeah. This person runs an organization that works with literally homeless youth who are out on the streets. And what he's noticed is most of these homeless youth have a situation with their parents where their parents being involved could be very dangerous for them physically, mentally, and emotionally, right? They're fleeing abuse or their parents are just not fit to be involved in children's lives. And, the students, the kids have made the decision they'd rather be on the streets than around their parents. Those kids are not making that decision lightly. And so forcing the parents to be involved in this is not a benefit to anybody. There's also, we look at anybody who has experience or exposure to the police, right? The more exposure to the police you have, the more likely you are to be victimized and harmed by them. And that's statistics, that's facts. You don't have to say, anything negative about individual officers just to know somebody who has a monopoly on violence like the state does. Anytime you're dealing with a child, that the more contact you have, the worse that could come in terms of outcomes. So, I just think that we're rushing to try to do something, but we're maybe making things worse, and there's no evidence that this will actually help anything in the long term. What we need in the long term, in the medium term, we could do what Baltimore has done, right? So we could have late night pool parties. We could have community centers that are open with fun things to do. We could have video game tournaments. We could, provide resources and security at events so that kids can go blow off some steam, have some fun without having to bring their gun because they're worried they might get shot if they don't have some way to defend themselves. We could provide youth employment. We could help people get jobs in industries that they care about, so that they have something to lose, and so they have something they're interested in. They're less likely to get involved in violence and less likely to, get involved in any illicit activities that might require violence, right? So there's a lot of things we could do, even within the capitalist framework, even within the United States. I'm not even talking about other countries that have, solved this problem long ago. Right. Even countries that allow self-defense and the right to bear arms. That doesn't mean children should have access to high-capacity firearms like we have here in this country. So, where do I stand on this? It's super sad, and it's really frustrating to see our city leadership nibbling around the edges and just ignoring the poverty and the exploitation of working people that is at the core of this issue.
Yeah. Yeah, and it reminds me also of just like I grew up in the, when I was like young, in like, elementary, middle school, it was like stranger danger time,
right?
Stranger danger. And then to come to find out, of course, that's all manufactured. And like, in many ways, the safest place for a child to be is in like a public park at night, unfortunately, right? I mean, because who is it that harms our youth? It's like they're gymnasts, right? And I mean, it's like people who are close to them, unfortunately. So
pastors a lot of times.
Right. So it's really a deeper issue that, and the medium term solutions that you present. It's like, I mean, I almost laughed at first because I was like, this is so obvious. This is so easy. Like, have a community center that's open. Like, have a youth center. Have things for kids to do. Like,
right. And this isn't like, these aren't ideas that the crazy socialist Jesse Brown came up with. These are, average working class members of my district reached out to me saying, hey, I hope you're thinking about these ideas. And, I'd been doing some thinking, but everything I just mentioned were ideas that came from my base, just people voluntarily sending me ideas. And then when I asked them for more details, they provided more details. So everyday working people have better ideas than our political leadership, even with no training and without getting paid to do it.
Yeah, that's a good lesson right there.
Right?
That's very telling. Yeah, and it's important to keep in mind that you don't need to run this city. You don't need any credentials or any kind of pedigree, because actually the people who run this city have neither of those. Really run it.
Yep.
Okay, so I mean, speaking while we're on the topic of young people, the new school year is about to start, and I know that you, as well as the Democratic Socialist of America, the Central Indiana chapter, have been really consistently active in fighting for fully funded, fully public education.
That's right.
And so as kids go back to school, especially for our parents listening out there, and for our young people who are of school age, who are going to school, I'm wondering really two things. One, if you could let us know about the current landscape and the potential future for fully funded, fully public education. And then second, and I can repeat this later if you need, but what are the most important changes that we should be aware of as the new school year starts?
Yeah, so thank you for that. And thanks for shout out to all my comrades who have done amazing work for the fully funded, fully public work over this last semester, the last legislative session. But the fight is just beginning, right? Mm-hmm. And actually, it's been ongoing for decades. It's just that people had been beaten down and didn't know how to fight back until recently. People have been coming out of the woodwork, ready to fight, and so happy to have DSA and the Indianapolis Education Association, the teachers union here in Indy, actually standing up and fighting back, and they want to participate. The IPS, Indianapolis Public Schools Parents Council, just kind of organically, spontaneously created. This is just working class parents, saw what was happening in the news, and I think they have 300 members. They just formed a few months ago. Mm-hmm. So again, it's just kind of spontaneous action to try to figure out what we can do to fight back against the State House. And when I say the State House, often I use that as shorthand for the Republican Party. But Indiana is actually almost unique in the United States because we have a significant chunk of our Democratic Party who are working hand in hand with the Republicans to try to destroy public education. I remember watching a YouTube documentary earlier this year, and the documentary was filmed in Canada, but it was about North American privatization and charterization. And in that, continent-wide documentary, they mentioned Indiana as being one of the worst places in the entire, North Americano area that that has just sold out our public education. And, I knew it was happening. I knew it was bad, but I hadn't realized how unique this was. So essentially what's happening, if you drive around Indianapolis, you'll see billboards, you'll see yard signs all the time advertising for quote unquote public schools, free to attend public schools. And they're almost always charter schools that are doing that advertising. I've been debating people in the past where they said, well, gosh, at this point, almost half of the students in Marion County go to a charter school. So they must, the parents must be choosing. They're choosing this better kind of school. And who are you to override the choices of the parents? But when you can't walk or drive anywhere without seeing 5 different signs telling you basically you're a bad parent if you don't send your kid to this school, and many of these parents think that they're sending their kids to traditional public schools, not realizing that these are actual charter schools, often run by for-profit entities. There was just a couple months ago, there's, Matchstick Learning in the near Northwest side, near the DSA office, where one of their top administrators had moved to Florida and stolen, I want to say $200,000 from the school and just spent it on wine and private travel. So this is all people who are just literally reaching into the public's pocket and stealing the money and using a school as the mechanism for doing so. And they use, substantial marketing budgets to mislead parents into going to these schools. And then the schools often just shut down with no notice, leaving parents in the lurch to try to find a new school last second for their kids.
And don't they, even sometimes bribe them with like, oh, come to our orientation and we'll give you a $200, gift card at Kroger or something like that.
I have heard those stories, yes.
Yeah.
Or come to this public meeting and talk about how great your school is. And we'll give you a t-shirt, we'll give you lunch, we'll give you dinner, we'll give you a gas card. We'll make it very easy for you to do so.
Yeah.
And so there's a narrative right now. So, okay. At the end of the State House legislative session, Joe Hogsett got involved to help push for something called the Indianapolis Legislative Education Alliance, ILEA. I might have screwed up the words, but it's ILEA, which is a new board that he now chairs himself. The board is stocked with almost exclusively shills for the charter school industry, people who personally profit based on charter schools doing well or who have already profited in the past and are just deeply embedded in that ecosystem. So what this agency, what this association is in charge of doing by December 31st is coming up with a plan by which IPS, our real democratically elected school board, can figure out how to give resources to charter schools to help them pay for transportation and facilities costs. So already under state law, there are huge carve-outs, and charter schools just get access to grants, get access to a bunch of different money. They already, if IPS ever has to leave a building, they have to offer to sell it to a charter school for $1 and take a gigantic loss. That was already on the books. But charter industry, including like Brandon Brown, the guy who makes over $300,000 to lobby our state house every year, he said that wasn't good enough. We need more money to go into the hands of these privatizers. And so Joe Hogsett is helping shepherd that in. And so they're having conversations right now about how much money to take away from IPS and how many facilities to take away from them. How can we force IPS to pay to bus people to schools that aren't IPS schools? And I actually sat down. I'll sit down and have, coffee or lunch or talk with anybody, even, people who I think are despicable and have totally different ideas than mine. So, I sat down with a person who wrote a kind of infamous editorial. I'm not going to be too specific because I promise some sort of confidentiality there. But this person made it very clear that the goal of all of these state house shenanigans, the goal of the ILEA is to kill IPS. It's to kill public education and replace it with only this fly-by-night charter industry. And that's what they're trying to do. So by December 31st, they're forced by the state house to come up with a plan for how the state house is supposed to then come and carve up IPS, and sell it off to the highest bidder. So it's not too late to fight against this. Joe Hogsett himself actually begged the state house allies to exempt these ILEA meetings from the open door law. So he wanted to have it hidden from the public so that nobody would have a right to pay attention to what's going on or hear what's going on. We made such a big stink about it that they've been having public hearings and publicizing the meetings anyway. So it just shows that even when it feels like it's a lost cause and there is no power, we still have the power to keep these people on their heels.
Yeah.
So, pay attention to our social media. We'll be pushing information about when the next ILEA meeting is, because otherwise what's going to happen, almost certainly what's going to happen is IPS is going to have to ask for a referendum and ask for more tax dollars to stay afloat, because the charter schools keep coming after them and taking their money away after they've already asked the taxpayers for it.
Right.
So it's a lose-lose for public education, but teachers are getting involved in their unions and fighting back. DSA is fighting back. IPS Parents Councils is fighting back. There are ways to get involved and push for education to be, this is why we say fully funded, fully public. We want you to have enough money. Everyone deserves music classes, art classes. They deserve to actually have real education and not just, be sitting there with Chromebooks and prepping for the test, right? But it also should be fully public, meaning accountable to the public, elected by the public, and not beholden to these big corporate interests. So we're going to keep fighting for both of those.
That's great. Yeah. And also public in that, like, you have to take every student. You can't
That's right.
just kick them out, which is why all these, I have a PhD in education, and not that means that much, but there's a consensus. There's a consensus, and it's not a new consensus. It's like for 20 years, the consensus has been that charter schools are basically just like a way for our tax dollars to be funneled into private hands.
That's right.
And Teach for America has been exposed for doing that. And that's not even like the proper charter system, but all these charter schools, and there's so many. If you just Google it, like charter school corruption, and click on news and go any city in this country, and they fail. Their test ground was in many ways New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, and it was a total failure there. It's like they have their track. If you think like public education in the United States has a great track record, actually.
It really does.
And charter education has a terrible track record. And its origins, too, really come out of the Brown v. Board of Education and desegregation. And that's when school choice became a thing. It was basically like, well, white people were like, now my kids got to go to school. Black kids, maybe I should have a choice to send them to some other school. That's the origins of it.
Right, choice to be racist. That's
exactly,
right.
Yeah. And so we choose to fight Brown v. Board of Education. Of course, the Supreme Court quickly, went rolling that back regardless. But it's just I just want to say that just for listeners out there to know, like, there's not really a debate about the effectivity of charter schools. Now, granted, there are occasional charter schools that are genuinely community-based, right? That are progressive in the sense of education, right? Not even politically, but in the sense that they look at education as progressing the development of the human being, and et cetera, et cetera. But that is a very small minority. The reason why some charter schools have 100% graduation rates is because they kick out all the students who aren't going to graduate a year before or their senior year. It's just
I worked at a charter school, and that's what happened with our school.
Is it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, this isn't, these are not exceptional stories, unfortunately. It's the rule rather than the exception.
And it's also one more example of capitalist entities, whether they're in the Republican Party, Democratic Party, or just some business, who will infiltrate some public sector organization, intentionally destroy it, right? They'll destroy its regulatory capacity. They'll destroy its ability to function effectively by defunding it. And then they'll look at the kind of burnt out husk that they broke and be like, look, see, this is the proof that the public sector doesn't work. We have to privatize everything. And it's bad faith bullshit, right? Sorry if I'm not allowed to cuss here, but, the same people who are now saying how unfair it is that charter schools don't get your tax dollars for transportation were the ones who just a few years ago were pointing out the fact that they didn't ask for this money as the reason why charter schools should be allowed to exist. So the arguments just change every couple of years. They think you're too stupid to look back at what they've said on the record not very long ago. So we're proving them wrong.
Yeah, that's great. And it's so promising. And because I remember when Gail Cosby was first, running for the Indiana Public School Board, I remember talking to her, and just because she came up in the public school system, as a professor, and was on the public school board and became a professor to study what the hell's going on.
Right.
And wrote a really excellent dissertation about her experiences there, try to really systematically understand it. And I remember sitting down with her, and we were both kind of just like, yeah, it's wild how in Indianapolis, there's just been no counter narrative. There's been no counter narrative to this for so long. And so it's really inspiring to see that there is now a counter narrative, and that, lo and behold, once people learn that and they see, oh, wait a second, I don't understand the situation. Now I understand the situation, and they're moved into action, that they're moving into action. And, definitely hats off to DSA, Central Indiana DSA, for the work that you've done. And we will encourage our listeners to go. centralindsa.org is a website.
That's right.
Follow their social media and get involved in the campaign for fully funded, fully public education, because that's what our students deserve, because you don't have to go very far. Just drive a couple miles to Carmel, Indiana, and it's one of the best rated schools in the country. And it's not a charter school.
No,
it's a public school. It's fully funded and it's fully public.
That's exactly right.
And in the education books that I teach, it's always singled out as one of the top ones. It's okay, well, it's not a secret. It's not like a formula we haven't really figured out yet, right? The answers are already there. It's just a lack of willingness, and it's the agenda of those who are empowered to prevent us from everybody having access to a school like, they do in Carmel.
Right. And that I want to hit on that last note. I'm going to sound like a broken record because this is all I ever talk about, right? There's an Upton Sinclair quote that says it's hard to get a man to understand something if his salary depends on him not understanding it. I might have slaughtered that a little bit, but when we have political leaders who are getting paid by the pro-charter organizations, that's why they're not speaking out. It's not that there's no narrative because they don't know any better. Like Derek just said, all the studies have shown there's limited, if any, efficacy in creating new school choice options. And certainly a place like Marion County, where you can't throw a rock without hitting 2 charter schools, but they're still approving new ones all the time. So it cannot possibly be about educational choice or what's better for students or parents. It's just people robbing you. And the reason you haven't heard elected officials or any powerful people speaking out against it is because they're robbing you too.
Yeah. Yeah, and for one more final anecdote, there's a educational historian named David Laborie. He wrote a really good book called A Zero-Sum Game, and in it he just talks about basically citing a bunch of studies. But if you ask any if you go out on the sidewalk, where let's say Philadelphia, where there's a range of schools, right, and ask any parent about what do you think about public schools, and the answer is more likely than not going to be oh man, it's such a state of disarray.
Right.
But then when you ask them about their kid's school, they're going to be oh, it's wonderful. The teachers are great. I'm there all the time. They're, they call me when there's a problem, et cetera. Right. So just to show the discrepancy and just to show that actually we can understand our own experiences
exactly.
and then just generalize them outward, know? Yeah. So that's good. We should end on that note because, the year isn't over, the fight isn't over, the fight's really just beginning.
That's
we can take our public schools back, we can take our local government back. It's going to take all of us, and take all kinds, and that's why we're, here, PSL Indianapolis. We were ecstatic when, during the 2023 primaries, Jesse, when you beat City-County Councilor, former City-County Council Vice President Zach Adamson. I remember waking up in the morning and I was very excited. Not that I didn't have faith in you, and not that I didn't vote for you, not that I didn't have faith in our people, but just the fact that, I think he was the third most powerful Democratic Party Democratic Party official, and he was in the City-County Council. It was going to be his 4th term or something like that, right?
Sounds about right.
Yeah, that you defeated him as an open socialist and without corporations back, behind you, right?
Yeah,
without
not a dime from any corporation.
Yeah, and it was just it's like a Bernie Sanders phenomenon. Just people giving you $5 and volunteering to go knock on doors. I know some of our comrades, went door knocking for the campaign, and so we continue to salute you for that, and also for staying true to your principles and for not, bowing down or caving in, for willing to be expelled from the caucus, because who wants to be a part of that caucus? Geez.
For real.
Yeah. So, thanks again for coming on the show. It's been very enlightening and informative and energizing, and I hope our listeners are too. So thank you, Jesse.
Solidarity forever. Thank you.
All right. We'll leave it there for this segment of Naptown People's Radio, and we'll be right back.
What happened is that we responded. Where there is repression, there will be resistance.
And we're back with Naptown People's Radio. I hope everyone enjoyed that interview with Derek and Jesse just as much as I did. On this show, we talk so much about the disappointments that we face and we come across from government. And it's so nice to have someone here in Naptown on Naptown People's Radio who is actually for the people. Next, we have our Circle City shout out. This week's shout out goes out to Bryce Gustafson. Gustafson is an organizer with the Citizens Action Coalition. The Citizens Action Coalition, or CAC, is Indiana's oldest and largest consumer and environmental advocacy organization. So it was founded in 1974 by a group of organizations, churches, labor unions, as well as senior groups who saw the need for a grassroots organization dedicated to protecting consumers during the energy crisis. They report that they've helped Hoosiers save more than $10 billion, that is with a B, $10 billion in excess utility charges. CAC advocates on behalf of Hoosiers on issues regarding energy, policy, utility reform, healthcare, pollution prevention, and family farms. CAC's activities include research, public education, organizing citizens, creating public awareness, lobbying legislators, intervening in utility cases before the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission, and even litigating. Their mission is to initiate, facilitate, and coordinate citizen action directed to improving the quality of life of all inhabitants of the state of Indiana through principled advocacy of public policies to preserve democracy, conserve natural resources, protect the environment, and provide affordable access to essential human services. As an organizer with the CAC, Bryce has not only helped advocate for citizens and work to protect the environment, he's also helped with educating us as well. Very recently with the data center, the Google data center specifically, that's going to be built on the south side of Indianapolis, which we've briefly touched on here at Naptown People's Radio. And with the rise in electric bills we'll be seeing here in Indiana. So he has gone out, the organization has gone out to educate us by doing interviews, talking to the people. And these are things that if it wasn't for the CAC, if it wasn't for Bryce, we would have no idea that this was even happening or have the language to understand what is happening. When we were in the streets struggling for Nichelle Hayes, the CEO for the Indianapolis Public Library, Bryce was out there with us. He was out there with the PSL, and he was advocating for, the library to do the right thing. I think that's still just a wild thing that we had to be involved in a struggle at the public library to have somebody who is the most qualified, the most known in the city to be the CEO of the public library. And Bryce was out there right along with comrades struggling. There are so many ways to be a comrade, so many ways to show up for the people. Bryce does it through advocacy of the environment. He does it through meeting with the PSL and like, hey, how can I show up? How can I help? If you're interested in learning more and being a part of the Citizens Action Coalition, you can go to their website, citact.org. And shout out to Bryce for doing the good work. All right, so Derek, what do we got on the docket for this week?
So most immediately on Wednesday, July 30th, we have our monthly PSL Liberation Forum called The Power of Organizing Together. Now, it's not controversial on the left anymore, fortunately, to talk about the need for organization. But what kind of organization do we really need, right? And to answer that question, we have to first answer the question, what kind of organization are we up against? What kind of organization that upholds this system, that protects sexual abusers and predators and killer cops and, warmongers and war criminals? what kind of organization are they, and what kind of organization do we need to defeat them? And that's going to be the topic, and we'll be blessed to hear from people who have been in the struggle for years and people who are new to the struggle, and we'll all be sharing and learning from each other at that time. I highly encourage everybody to get down to the Liberation Center to check out Colors by Frida, the second annual of our new tradition, comprised of artworks inspired by the communist Mexican artist Frida Kahlo, also a disabled woman. And last year it was Angelina Hampton. It was a solo show. This year we have a tremendous, diverse grouping of BIPOC artists of oppressed identities, whose artworks are influenced by Frida. And I don't know what you think about Danny, but I mean, it really has transformed the space and our atmosphere in here. And every time I walk in, I'm just like, I got to get to work.
Every time I walk in, I'm like, man, I wish we could just keep all of the art up. Honestly, it's beautiful in here. It's always beautiful in here. But like something about, first off, who doesn't love Frida Kahlo? If you know Frida Kahlo, I don't know how you could not love Frida Kahlo. And just seeing all the art is just amazing. And it's a great environment to organize in, just seeing her face.
Yeah. Thank you. And the second thing, I mentioned at the top of the show. So this Friday, August 1st, from 6 to 8 p.m. is going to be First Friday with Vernon T. Bateman at Gallery 42. And in advance of that, we are calling on all of our members, supporters, listeners, anybody with a sense of justice to get involved in a call-in campaign that begins right now. And just to give you a little bit of background on this, and this is just one of the just like countless injustices that this man has faced and continues to face, but last year, Vernon walked in with a order for child support from somebody named Dorothy Nicole Scales, and she now lives in Las Vegas, but she was an Aramark employee subcontracted by the IDOC, and she had power over Vernon. She could deliver his food, not deliver his food. She could give him write-ups. She could get him sent to the hole. So there's a power imbalance there. And yet, the petition, which was filed by Deputy Prosecutor McDermott, says, Promise N. Scales, the daughter, was conceived out of wedlock on or about May 2008 in the county of Hamilton, state of Indiana. Promise N. Scales was born out of wedlock on February 14, 2009 at Ascension St. Vincent Hospital in the state of Indiana. Vernon T. Bateman is the father of said child. But there's one glaring omission that Deputy Prosecutor McDermott failed to consider. Where was Bateman during the years of conception and birth? Bateman was falsely incarcerated during this time. He was shackled and chained in solitary confinement. He did not have the ability to consent to a sexual relationship. And so here you have somebody that the Indiana Department of Corrections, the Lake County police officers, the entire system has kept unjustly incarcerated until this day. That then, to add insult to injury, facilitates it so that this woman, his rapist, can sue him for child support. And so what we did was we said, okay, yep, we need DNA confirmation to confirm that the child is indeed his. Now, mind you, we knew it was his. He had dedicated books to this child. He probably gave more money to the child than the mother did during Vernon's time in prison. But we wanted that evidence because once new DNA evidence is discovered, it sets the clock back for the, statute of limitations, 1 year. So that means that, and the IDOC investigator found instances of wrongdoing. And so now we need to put pressure on the county prosecutor to do the right thing and actually press charges against
a known rapist. So if you look in the show details, we're going to have information and a script. We're going to be asking you to make calls all throughout this week to charge Vernon's rapist with the crime of rape, because we actually have a harm and a crime that happened against one of our own people, and we demand that they be held to account. So keep a lookout for that. And that'll do it for this week's episode of Naptown People's Radio. Danny, I'll turn it back to you.
I think before we get into that, I know last week we got into standing up for women who have been sexually assaulted, right? And something that I don't think I mentioned it, but I definitely should have, is like when we're standing up for women who have been sexually assaulted, it's not just women that we're standing up for, right? We're standing up for everyone who has been sexually assaulted. When I think about the situation with Vernon and his rapist and this poor child, right? This poor innocent child, Vernon and this poor child. But it reminds me of situations where you hear like a woman gets raped and then she wants to have an abortion and then she's not able to have the abortion, right? Because the rapist is like, no, you can't have an abortion. To rape someone and then say, oh, also, you're going to pay for this child that you could not consent to giving life to, is there are no words that I can say on this station. There are no words that I can use to talk about like how disgusted I feel every time I think about the situation. And every time I think about all the injustices that have happened to Vernon and just how the system continues to over and over and over again do wrong by him.
Yeah.
And also just like men in general, right? Like it's so hard for men in general to talk about sexual assault that happens to them because men can be raped, men can be sexually assaulted. And it can happen from women, right? This is a perfect example of that. And how difficult it is to come forward in general, but especially when, like I said last week, when your rapist is a cop, who do you go to? Who do you talk to?
Yeah. And I mean, every week, Vernon's got to go down and pay child support to this woman, when in reality, this child is a responsibility of the state of Indiana, you know, and Vernon, they block him at every opportunity that, you know, that comes across, you know, his plate to make money. And they make him pay $800, you know, for these BS polygraph tests. And so just so our listeners know, though, the Hendricks County Prosecutor's Office, which is the county I think that we'll be targeting, we are approaching this as she probably doesn't have all this background information, so we don't want to be yelling at her. You know, we don't want to be yelling at them. We just want to be calmly explaining the facts of the case as concerned citizens. And I think by doing so, we can get her to do the right thing and actually file charges against this rapist, because there is an overabundance of proof that it was rape.
All right. So that's it for this episode of Naptown People's Radio. If you found today's discussion useful, pass it on, leave a comment, and listen for our next episode to drop. Support us at support.pslindianapolis.org and by shopping at indieliberationcenter.org/store. Definitely be on the lookout because it's almost August, so Black August we're going to have a bunch of stuff coming out for that. If you have a suggestion for the show, you can email us at producer@naptownpeopleradio.com. The road ahead is long, but we walk it together. Study with your comrades, build with your community, and always remember, theory without action is paralysis, but action without theory is chaos. Once again, I'm your host, Danny Abdullah, here with my co-host,
Derek Ford.
Stay dangerous, stay disciplined, and stay in the struggle.
We trying to create a movement. We got a chance to do something in Indiana that brothers like myself been talking about for the last 40 years. When I first became political and we was organized behind the walls in the 80s and 90s, some of the stuff that we doing now with the different programs and the different institutions that we have and things like the Indy Center is things that we used to talk about and dream about doing. And now we doing them. See what I'm saying? We doing it. And we got to keep that momentum going. And it's also generation. So as the next generation come up, you know what I'm saying, it's on y'all to take it to the next level and take it to the next stage. Good salute. Shop Shakur.